new league member. And I am also the co-coordinator of the league's redistricting committee for the state. And Fran Larkins, who is here, she's from the Fredericksburg area. She's joining me as co-coordinator going forward. So we're very happy to have you here. So a couple housekeeping items. You might have seen a message pop up. We are going to record this session so that people who could not attend today, or if you know anyone who can attend tomorrow, I believe it's at 4 o'clock, we're going to have the same information from Representable. But if you don't want to be seen, you can turn off your video, which is on the bottom left corner of your screen, and we can just see your name. But if you want us to see your wonderful faces, keep your cameras on. If you have not already done so, it looks like everyone's muted except for me and Fran, and I think Joan. And there is a chat box, so you can start using the chat box. If you have questions, we'll collect those and try and answer them at the end of the program this evening. Okay, so this is part 2 of our Communities of Interest training with the team from Princeton University. Tonight, you're going to learn to use their Representable app to map your community of interest and submit it to the Redistricting Commission. The team has planned a more detailed presentation tonight than we had back in December. This is like part 2 or Representable 201 instead of 101. When you're done tonight, you should be able to draw your own community of interest map, and you should be able to train others in your community to use this tool as well. So before you hear from the Representable team, I'm going to just briefly bring you up to date. You probably know a lot of this or all of this, but for those who may not have been keeping up, as you probably know, Amendment 1 was approved by nearly 2/3 of Virginians.
DeRosa.
And that includes all but one of the counties and cities in the Commonwealth. And the one county that did not approve the amendment was my own here in Arlington. And I apologize, I did what I could. But the 4 General Assembly leaders appointed 8 legislators, including 4 delegates and 4 senators, to the commission on December 1st. And around the same time, the application period for citizen commissioners opened up. They had basically 4 weeks to get their applications in, and those were due on December 28th. And within a few days, by January 1st, the General Assembly leaders each compiled a list of 16 or more citizen applicants, which they submitted to the selection committee. That committee met last Wednesday for their second meeting on January 6th. And it was very fascinating, I think, to watch them, because all of these meetings, remember, are going to be held open to the public, whether in person or virtually. So you can watch every single meeting that you would like to. But I found it interesting to watch the 5 retired justices on the committee deliberate and really look into the criteria that they had to follow. They ended up selecting 2 citizens from each list for a total of 8 citizen members. The list is fairly diverse. My personal disappointment is that we did not have more women on the commission. But anyway, the commission is going to meet on or before February 1st, so in the next few weeks, and they will at that meeting select a chair, and that chair has to be one of the 8 citizen members. At that point, I'm sure they will also discuss what their process will be going forward. They have to discuss when to meet. They have to schedule at least 3 public hearings in different parts of the state, which probably will be easily managed using virtual technology. So there's a lot that they will be discussing. So look for that, and we'll post it. The meetings are posted in the DLS website. We'll share that link with you later. So we are still not sure when the census data is going to drop. There's all kinds of reports, different things are going forward. Recently, I heard that March 1st was a possible date when the census data would be shared, but we are still not sure. But in the meantime, we are encouraging you and all citizens to prepare to submit ideas and testimony to the commission via the DLS portal and or at public hearings. One way to get started would be to map your community of interest, which the commission must respect according to criteria legislation. So that is an actual criteria that they have to consider. So you can do this on your own. You can gather with friends or neighbors to draw your own maps together. You can share this with your PTAs, church groups, school groups, civic organizations, etc. So be sure to take this and send it out whenever you can. Someone asked whether the December workshop was recorded, and yes, it was. We can share that link later. It's on the League's YouTube website, so we will send that to you. Okay. So I think we'll go forward. I'd like to introduce you to the Representable team from Princeton University. I know Michaela's here. Michaela, I don't know if anyone else is here tonight to join you.
It's just me tonight.
Oh, okay. They deserted you. So this is Michaela Daniel, and she's one of the fabulous members of the Representable team. So I'm going to let her take it from here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela. I am a senior in the Near Eastern Studies Department at Princeton University. And with Representable, I am one of the outreach coordinators. So I'm always one of the point persons for if you have any questions about Representable. I usually do demos, and then I always take back any feedback you have to relay to the rest of the team. So today I'm just going to give a really short presentation on what is Representable, why we were created, why communities of interest are so important, and then I'm going to walk you through the website, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to share my screen and present. Great. So we're Representable, a free tool for mapping communities of interest. We were actually created a couple of years ago during a computer science class called COIS 333. And since then, we've grown just from an idea for making the redistricting process more equitable and more accessible to everyone to an actual organization operating in over 9 states with feedback from over 10 organizational partners and growing. So we have students from all over Princeton University working on our team, and we work in partnership with Princeton Gerrymandering Project and Schmidt Futures. So what is the purpose of even having a community of interest tool, right? So 26 plus states have legal requirements to respect communities of interest during the redistricting process. And this includes Virginia. However, there really isn't a working method for getting COI data to map makers during redistricting before they draw the maps. And consequently, this leads to your packing and cracking, and in general, not listening to the voices of community members. So we've created a platform to solve this issue. We deliver previously unavailable COI data to map droughters using a standardized digital format that's really easy to analyze. This enables public testimony by allowing anyone to submit a map, and it also supports journalists and analysts with data to evaluate said proposed maps. So a quick overview of redistricting in Virginia. I understand that this group is really familiar with the concept, so I won't read everything, but I can also share these slides with you after this meeting. But there is the hybrid commission, which you could send your community of interest ideas to. Communities of interest are a required criteria in the redistricting process, and public input will also more than likely occur this year, so your ideas will be taken into account. An example of gerrymandering and why communities of interest are so important is Prince William County in Virginia. Virginia's only majority minority county with a substantial Latinx community. In the previous redistricting cycle, it was split 5 to 8 times by proposed state legislative district plans. And the NAACP president said that the plan effectively disenfranchised Prince William County and that they were concerned that the minority voice would be lost. But Representable is fighting back to fix this system with data with our tool. So now that we understand a little bit more about communities of interest and why they're so important, I'm going to show you all our website. All right. So when you type in representable.org, this is the site that you're going to see. So first I'm going to pretend that I'm Joe off the street. I just learned about communities of interest. I just learned about gerrymandering. I know that redistricting is coming up. I want to draw my maps. So I'm going to click Get Started. Here is our next landing page, just explaining that what you're about to do is add your community to the map. You're going to identify its shared interests and allow public officials to take your concerns into account. We also then identify the problem, which is gerrymandering, which is silencing communities, saying that politicians have been splitting up or packing together communities into districts that silence their voices, and that communities of interest help fight this. So now I'm going to select my state to get started. A fun fact is that my family actually just moved to Fairfax, Virginia. And ordinarily I would map it, but I want to give a more detailed account of how I would draw a community, which I'm deeply embedded in. So I'm going to draw my home community in Georgia for today. But every state, so all 50 states, have this state page, which explains, once again, what is redistricting, what it looks like in Georgia or Virginia or Nebraska, and then how Representable can help. It also gives criteria for redistricting. It also then defines a community of interest. Let's see. It usually varies by state. And in Georgia, the state constitution doesn't define a community of interest. So we give the typical definition, that is a population that shares cultural, historical, or economic interests. So now that I understand a little bit more about redistricting, the criteria, and communities of interest, I'm ready to get mapping. So first, you're going to be taken to this page, and you're going to be asked to make an account or to log in. So I already have an account, so I'm just going to sign in here, my Princeton email, my password. And now I'm going to tell them a little bit about myself. We're very clear with our privacy and terms that we're not using your data in any way. We're not selling your data to any corporations. This is just so that we have names for maps, so that we don't have a bunch of maps out there. We're not really sure who drew them, or a bunch of bots are drawing maps, or anything along those lines. So I'll just autofill in the interest of time. And then here on step 2, we're once again orienting people to what is a community of interest, geographic area that shares cultural, historical, or economic interests. We give some examples. A community of interest can include your neighborhood or where you live. It can just be the people in general who you want to choose a representative with. Or it could be a local group that's brought together by a common interest. So now that I've learned a bit more about communities of interest, I'm going to start the testimony portion of our tool. So before you even start drawing your map, we have people answer these questions, which are in this, to start thinking about who's in my community, what are the boundaries of my community, what are the issues that we all care about and that our representatives need to listen to in this upcoming cycle. So in the interest of time, I have already filled them out. The first one is about economic or environmental interests. We asked people where are residents employed, and if there are environmental concerns, what are they? We give some examples. It could be tourism, agricultural, maybe it's a mining town, maybe you have a polluted natural resource. So for my community in Lithonia, Georgia, the unemployment is a really major issue. Most jobs are located in the city. We're about 20 minutes out from Atlanta. So public transportation is very important, but MARTA, the public transportation system, doesn't run many buses around our cul-de-sacs. There's only a park and ride at Panola Road, which many can imagine if you need public transportation to get to your job, but the only way that you can get to the bus is getting to a park and ride. Sometimes that's an issue. And then also a side note, a lot of people work at Stonecrest Mall. We then ask people about community activities and services. Where do people gather and socialize? How and where does your community access services? Services like healthcare, educational services, childcare. We give some examples like libraries, parks, lakes, places of worship, public transport, local nonprofit organizations. So for my community, I would say that church is a centerpiece for most people. We are in the Bible Belt. I named some churches in particular that have, a very large congregation and therefore provide many services to the community, such as food banks, healthcare services, and childcare options. I then mentioned Stonecrest again, which is a huge activity. This is where most people hung out. I lived in this community since I was born, so I grew up going to the mall for several reasons and festivals and activities. And while in previous years it was quite unsafe, it's actually really turned around recently, which is great. And then on a last note, the closest hospital is DeKalb Medical Center. That's where I was born, and it's been a pillar of the community my entire life. I say this as if I'm not only 21 years old, but I hope the point still gets across. The third point is cultural or historical interests. So now think about, what are the cultural bonds of your community? What is your shared history? Once again, trying to get people to give testimony that's very detailed, so that when people, particularly map makers or people on a redistricting commission, are looking at this detailed testimony, they can see, oh, this is why we should draw the community in this way, instead of some abstract idea of a community of interest somewhere, in Lithonia, Georgia. So I say that my community is prominently Black. It's also quite aging. I wouldn't say that most people move back after they leave for college. And then lastly, this box is very open-ended: community needs and concerns. Just in general, what should politicians or map drawers know about your community? What are the needs of your community? Or is there just anything else you want to say? This can be shared policy concerns, the need for social service, relationship to other nearby communities, or issues with current district lines. So one thing that's really important for my community is that the schools are struggling, and they've been struggling for quite some time. And a particular issue is that in previous years, particularly when I was like 13, there was a state takeover of our schools, and the quality of them didn't really change. And a lot of residents think that there should be some accountability. Like, who do you go to when the school board is no longer truly in charge? So because of that, hypothetically, I think that we need to be in one state house and one state senate district, so that we can have one person to go to fighting for our kids. But truly, this could be anything in this box that you want to talk about, that, for example, your organization can tell your members, hey, we all need to put this one thing in this box so that the representatives can really see that this is a big issue. But now that I have finished really thinking about my community, who's a part of my community, where are the places that we gather, what are the issues that we care about, I'm ready to start mapping. So I'll name it Michaela's Home. And I will get started. So this is just our mapping page. We stop people before they map to let them know that you're about to map with census block groups, which is a base unit of the census. And it'll be highlighted when you hover over it. So as it says, I'll search for a zip code, which is 30038. And it zooms right in on where I wanted. But let's say, for example, oh, I don't quite remember like street names. It's been a couple of months. I can also type in places. So I talked about how the schools are really important to me. So I'll put in the high school. There it is, right at the top. So it'll zoom in. And this is exactly what I want. So now I'll zoom out a little bit and I'll start clicking on boxes. But let's say you don't necessarily have someone teaching you how to use the tool. The question mark in the top left corner can be used, there it is, to orient yourself. We have a video that's pending and it'll be loaded by the end of this week that takes you step by step. And then we also have FAQs that are already loaded. Specifically, once again, what are the units? Why am I unable to save my map? Mostly because all of the blocks need to be touching. That is a frequently asked question. And then, can you map outside of your state? No, if you want to do that, you need to add a new community. And then, how large can my community be? It can be as small as 1 unit or as large as 800 units. Most people don't go that big. I would say 10 is about an average size, but once again, you can do whatever you want. It's just important that the redistricting commission or your legislators know exactly what's on your mind. So I'll continue with mapping. I know that Panola Road is pretty important to me. I actually lived like in here, which is where it zoomed in. DeKalb Medical, I talked about that in my community information, which I can see right here if I needed a refresher. So I'll make sure to include the hospital because that's really important in my opinion. I know that if I live here, then the elementary and middle school are actually really close together. So they must be in this space. And then Evans Mill Road is also really important. But let's not forget Stonecrest Mall that I talked about, which is where most people are employed and most people hang out. So I'll search for that. Mall at Stonecrest. Yep, there it is, pretty close by. There we go. I'll zoom out and just make sure this is exactly what I want. So I wouldn't, for example, this is another way to orient people, like what wouldn't you include in your community? The nature preserve, not as important. I wouldn't say people really go there. I wouldn't say it's a hallmark of the community. I personally haven't even gone there, and I, lived there my whole life. I don't want to keep going west because I'm getting closer to Decatur, which I would say is a different community, and they have different services. They're a lot closer to the city. So I would say that Stonecrest and Lithonia are where I want to be. They used to be one city until about 3 years ago when they were split. So I'm okay with it being cross cities. And let's see, in community information, it also gives population. I would say this is a good size. I'm not concerned that it's too big. I think these are the people that I identify with. So I'll go ahead and save it. So this is the last step, or privacy in terms of use. Once again, just saying we're not going to sell your data. We're not going to publicly share your data. Everything is safe with us. Last note is that submitted communities are final. Once you save a community, you cannot edit it. You actually will need to create a new community and delete the old one. And then lastly, we've implemented reCAPTCHA to alleviate concerns about bots. And now I'm ready to submit. That's not good. Oh no. Let's see. Right side, it's saved. Oh yeah. And I'll just go ahead and go off of memory of Lithonia and Stonecrest and the mall. And the hospital's here, and that means the high school is here. And it all needs to touch. And about 40,000, yeah, that's fine. Then we'll save. Perfect, there we go. So this is the congratulations page saying that your community is now ready to be viewed and downloaded. What do I mean by downloaded? Well, if your state has a redistricting commission like Virginia does, you could possibly send a PDF of your community and submit it as public testimony. You could also export your community as a GeoJSON file, and you could use your map to draw voting districts because Representable is really great. It's very streamlined. It walks you step by step in the process of creating a community of interest. But if you want to make a voting district, you can upload your community of interest to Maptitude, Dave's redistricting app, or District R. In the future, specifically by March 2021, you could also import your GeoJSON file of your community of interest to District Builder, but as of right now, they don't have that capability. According to their public roadmap, it will be available in March of 2021. And then lastly, you can get a copy of your map sent to your email for personal records, or you could, forward it to your friends and family and tell them, hey, I made this map of our community. You should too, and send it to our representative. And then this page is also very cool. It's going to zoom in on my community, and I can see my community in conversation with data layers. So I can see the congressional districts, okay, we're kept together. Remember, I said, I think it's really important that we all be in one state house or state Senate district. And you see that we're split up a few times. And then with state Senate districts, not as much, but still not in one state Senate district. And then school districts, also really important. Notice how I was saying, oh, I wouldn't go too west because I don't want to get too close to Decatur and Avondale Estates and see how they have their own school district. So it's things like this that can get people starting to think about where my community is in space in terms of redistricting. And then lastly, we have demographics. Right now, it's just a number. We're still waiting on demographic data to be loaded, but that is an imminent change. You'll be able to see like ethnic and race data in addition to citizen voting age population. So this is how you would go through the site as an individual. I would be able to go back and see this map again if I click on my communities, which is right under my account. And we also have a Learn More tab. So if I have any questions, I can go to our FAQs. And if I have a question like, define the census block group, that's located underneath our redistricting glossary. So before I go ahead and take anyone through an organization, I'll just quickly show you through these FAQs. This is what they look like for community members and for organizations. And then this is our redistricting glossary. And then very quickly, I'll take you to the organization side of things. So let's say that on behalf of a group, you want to make an organization so you can collect all of the maps together at one time. You would go ahead and create an organization. It'll just be a button here. And you'll put the state that you're located in and a short description. Then you'll be taken to this organization dashboard where you can create a community mapping drive right here. You can also manage membership. You can appoint admins. They would be the only people who can see all of the maps that are being made and the names and the addresses. If you choose to collect them, you can make it so that people don't need to give their addresses. If you work with a population who would feel uneasy about that, you have the power to not collect that information. And then you can also view and share your organization's map. So I'll just look at one of our examples, the Greensboro COI data collection group. This is the link that I would send out to everyone who I want to create a map. I would say, hey guys, this is the link. I want you to click on it so that you can create a map and so I can see the map. And then when they create that map, I will click on this link here to see all of the maps in aggregate and in conversation with each other. So it'll zoom in on the state. And let's look at what Kyle said in Roanoke, Virginia. It'll zoom in on his community and it'll show me exactly what he said about it, about the historical, high unemployment, and the Fishtown settlements. I can then hop over to Sarah and see what she said about her cultural interests and community activities of her community. I can see these communities in conversation with the data layers I was talking about, everything from census block groups to counties, to state house districts, state senate districts, congressional districts, and the like. I can export all of these communities as a GeoJSON file or as a CSV file as well. And since they're opaque, I'll jump over to the next state. You can see them on top of each other. So let's say you do have a small area, like everyone, you send it to everyone in Fairfax, Virginia, and then you can still see them on top of each other. And this GeoJSON file, for example, is what you would upload into a Maptitude or to an Esri. So yeah, that's the website. I can go ahead and take questions. I will quickly add that there is a link for the League of Women Voters drive. And if you click on it, this is the page you will be taken to. You'll just scroll down and it'll be exactly the same thing as what I just walked you through with the redistricting news in Virginia, gives you the criteria, it gives you the definition for a community of interest in Virginia. And then you'll click draw your community and it will be exactly the same process that I just walked you through, where you give some identifying information, where you then give the testimony for your community, and then where you map your community at the very end. So that is the website. And I will stop sharing my, I'll just look at the chat very quickly to see. Yeah, great.
Thanks very much, Michaela. I know one person asked, what is a GeoJSON file? Someone also asked about emailing the files, which I think you answered right after that was posted.
Perfect. Yeah, so a GeoJSON file is a file that's compatible with mapping softwares. So a lot of people want to map districts, which is what has been done in previous years, where you go into, for example, Maptitude, and you go and you create a district, and then you send that and say, this is the district that I believe should be District 1 in the state of Georgia. So when we say that you have a GeoJSON file, it just means that you can take your community of interest and input it to that software so that you can then see the community of interest in that software as you're drawing the district, if that makes sense.
Okay, and Fran asked, the census blocks were changed in many areas in 2020. How recent are the representable census blocks? And is it possible to choose only a part of a census block?
It is not possible to choose only part of a census block, and they are updated as of the last census. So that would be like the 2010 census. But when the census data is updated, when that's released to everyone, our team of engineers will very quickly go in and make any changes, but the changes are expected to be small. So we don't expect like a census block group to be this big and then like, 10 census block groups at one time. You cannot actually do half of a census block group. We talked about this as a team a lot because we wanted it to be compatible with what map makers are using. And then that way, when you have very clearly census block groups that you delineated as your community, it can be translatable to policy, to updated district maps very easily.
Can I just point one thing out? As I'm working with this, one of our community's problems is that the census blocks themselves don't meet our needs. I mean, they go like across 95 when we would not want to, and this type of thing. And I have contacted our county, and I'm asking for the most recent census blocks from them. I had to do a FOIA to get it, but I haven't heard back from them yet. But when people see districts that look really crazy, some of the time it's because they're following census blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I think the way the tool actually started out was it was like freehand drawing, but we ran into a lot of problems with map makers would come to us and say, we don't really know what to do with this because it's not a metric that is usable on a large scale. Like if you had 20 people just freehand drawing their community, it wouldn't be applicable. So the census block groups definitely are a middle ground. A solution to not necessarily the census block groups not fitting the needs of your community is putting it in the community needs, that last question that I was answering, and say the census block group that we're most likely choosing doesn't really represent us, but it's the closest thing we have. We think that it should be below I-95 or above I-95 or split I-95. And then that's a way to make sure that your concerns are still heard.
Thank you.
The question.
Okay, David had several questions. One of his questions is, are there guidelines for the size of the community?
We don't have guidelines. We definitely want people just to draw what they think their community is. That's why we ask questions so that people has that as a reference for who's my community, what are our issues, what do we share in terms of resources. We will say that based on user interviews, most communities are only around 10 blocks that people have chosen, but that's by no means a minimum or a maximum.
How many communities can I submit?
You can submit as many as you want. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a common question. Like, for example, if I were to come from a different background and say, I grew up in Lithonia, but when they split it in 2010, I think that it really changed. So I feel like I'm in both communities and they're separate, but I know them both really well. I could have made a map for my community in Lithonia, and I could have made a map for my community in Stonecrest. Both are valid. We don't have a limit on it. Go crazy.
And I think when you try drawing a community map the first time, you're probably not going to like what you end up with. At least that was my experience. I don't know about Fran. I know you've tried drawing some maps too. So, you might draw one and then you'll have to delete it and then you can start again and create a new one. So you can do that. Okay. David also asks, how do we prevent ourselves from creating our own gerrymandered community?
That is a wonderful question. Another conversation we've been having is about how split communities may look bad, but you also don't want to pack groups into just one district. So I definitely think that's a use your own judgment. Representable is just a tool. We're here to make it easy to give your opinions. But I myself, when I was drawing my community, I was like, is this truly what I want for us to be in a single district? So I ended up looking it up, and that's exactly what my community needs, is just one person to answer to, because right now in our state house, we have 3, which is why I think is part of the reason the education situation hasn't improved. So I definitely think Representable is a starting point. And if you have questions, to, you know, do your research and then come back and draw another community and see if that fits your needs better.
Okay, Joanne asks, is there any way to work on a map and come back to edit it later? Or do you have to save and submit or lose the mapping you have already done?
There is no way to edit a map. You would have to delete it and then create another map entirely. And that was in response to some concerns we had from some organizations regarding people not being able to keep track of the edits. And it was just suggested that it was better to delete it, not have to deal with any privacy concerns, and just have people start over.
Anybody else have a question that you can, instead of putting in a chat, you could raise your hand or maybe unmute yourself?
I see that Elizabeth said that she lives in an over 55 community in Winchester City with about 90 households. Obviously, their needs are very similar. Most of us living here are 70 to 80 years old. Does it make sense for me to draw a community of interest map and submit it? I just like to say I also live in an over 55 active adult community. We have a few more households than 90, but we have concerns that we are not being represented well, both in the congressional district and in the both in the General Assembly. And so we are some of us are getting together, and we're going to talk about, well, what's important to us, what would we really like to have, and then once we've done that, then we may share that. There's another senior community just across the road from us, literally, that we'll share that. So we're just sort of trying different things. But I would say yes, you know, if you've got something that you feel like you're not being represented well, and you would like to see something different, then I would say this is a good way to go. Sorry, Michaela. Because I had done it is why I wanted to mention it.
So how do you get, this is Joanne. So how do you get an account to use this?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, after I clicked get started, it took me to that login screen and the sign up screen. So they're on the exact same page. I just logged in, but on the very same side. I can also share my screen again. Very quickly.
Anybody in the world can go in and do this?
Yep. And all you need is an email address and a password that you make. We don't really vet it. It's just any password. And I'll just share that very quickly. So
how you set that up. I'm sorry, Michaela, that how you set up an account. I just thought, I didn't know anyone in the world could use this. You know, I mean, aren't there going to be hundreds and thousands of communities of interest submitted?
Oh,
that is the hope. I think
we'd
people,
like that.
Yeah.
And the commission's going to look at them all?
In Virginia, they have to.
They have.
COIs are a requirement of the redistricting process.
If you submit it. Yeah.
If you submit, well, we have to submit. So what, might there not be a lot of garbage up there? If anyone in the world could come and like just have a community of interest of their block?
Well, that's the thing. So League of Women Voters is an organization, and they have their drive where you could go in and under League of Women Voters, submit your community map. And then League of Women Voters, hypothetically, could take that to the commission and say, hypothetically, these are all of our members. We're a part of this group. These are the concerns that they have. Take this into account. And one could argue that when you submit under a group, like maybe the redistricting commission looks at that differently. Or maybe you could go to your representative for your state house or your state senate or your congressional representative who has to listen to you because you elected them. They would also take that into account. So I think that's the slippery slope of public input, right? Like, don't you have a lot of garbage? But I think Americans, like, we elect representatives to listen to us and to our concerns. So I still highly recommend to create a map and make sure that your concerns are taken into account.
Okay, thanks.
So you're urging us to make our map and submit it to the commission as a citizen. This is what I consider my community of interest.
Yes.
And also submit it to the league?
Yes.
Well, yeah, we'd love to see that. And Michaela, explain again, if they want it to be collected in the, what's called the League's map drive, they need to start at the link. Is that right?
That is
First?
correct.
And then they start drawing their map.
Yes.
Okay. So I just put the map, the link in the chat again. It's representable.org drive/League of Women Voters of Virginia.
Where is that?
I just put in the chat.
Okay, I'm looking. Sorry.
And you,
Yeah. So if you, after you set up your account with, I think, your name, your email and your password, then you can use this link,
Yep.
I think, and go to it. And then that'll take you to the map drawing page. And what happens is when you save it, it'll save in that drive, but you can also email it to yourself, print out a PDF at the same time.
I have a larger question. I tried to write it out, but it's too complicated. So let me see if I can put it, just use the congressional district as an example. I live in the Charlottesville, Albemarle area. And the real issue for us looking at that is that the district goes from Fauquier to the North Carolina line. So I could define the Charlottesville, Albemarle community of interest, but really what I want the commission to know is this is a ridiculous district. Why can't we be, it's really Central Virginia, Piedmont. Why couldn't there be more of a, an interest of that Central Virginia, Piedmont that has more of a historical, cultural, and a lot of other things in common, whereas, while I don't care that much about it, the further south is really Southside, which has a whole other cultural. And I don't see how exactly we can use the tool to get those points across, or maybe I'm missing that.
So there are definitely two ways to go about this, like as an individual, because we said that your community could be tens of census block groups big. You could map most of that portion that you really care about. And then in the testimony portion, you could go into great detail as to why that part you care about. And then that last box of other concerns, say right now, this is in one district with the South Side. It doesn't make sense. It's not doing it for us. You should change this. So it still works. And then the alternative is that you do that side. And then what you do is you create a community mapping drive, and you can get you and your neighbors and your friends and everyone to make a bunch of maps of these two areas and say, here's 80 people who agree with me and who also map their communities in this fashion, and who also said in the testimony portion that we shouldn't be in the single district. This is why you should listen to us, because I've collected all of this evidence in map form and in testimony form.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question about just the use of census information? Because, census data is also organized from an economic community perspective. And it seems like what we're using hasn't considered that. My fundamental question, it goes back to my concern about gerrymandering, is that its purpose has been to isolate political votes so that single parties get voted. And the net effect is we don't have the opportunity as citizens to engage in dialogue so that we learn about each other and we reach a consensus and have a broader community, truly diverse of ideas. There's more than just the color of our skin or our ethnicity or historical heritage, or, that brings us together. And so I'm not sure that the tool that we have here is going to do that. I see the advantage of the community activism, but so I guess I'm coming back again to how could why should this be so different from the census tract for economic communities? Because that's how people live, work, trade together.
Mhm.
Why is it so different?
So what we found and why the tool was started is because of the term community of interest itself. It meant so many things, everything from like mining communities that were, primarily economic. That's what brought people together. That's who they wanted to be represented by in their state house or state senate, right? It was just purely economic. And then you had communities of interest that were church-based, for example, like my community, where churches were really important and it was all about religion. Communities of interest really could be everything, ranging from Midwestern towns to, the cities like Atlanta. So as a result, we wanted a tool that encompassed all of these communities, so that truly anyone in the United States from any community could use this tool to advocate for their needs, whether it just be economic, which is why we have that economic box, or it could be cultural and historical, or it could be all four.
But
Mhm.
let me just interrupt here a minute.
Yeah.
When you say, mining, I come from my family. I haven't been there for all of my life hardly, but was in West Virginia. They weren't in mining, but I think about that when you think, to me, this is tribal.
Mhm.
What you're doing is focusing on tribal. We're broader than that. So how do we get beyond just the single focused, this is my family, my tribe, I go to this church. We are bigger than that. And I don't see how this is getting around it. So help me with it, please.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I go back to my community because that's what I know best. Like, notice how I didn't just say that my community were Black. Like, I would say like my community is 90% Black. I could have easily said that my community is predominantly Black.
Uh-huh.
I could have easily just said period. That's it. That's my community. But what I did was I said, I was born at DeKalb Medical Center. Most of my friends were born at DeKalb Medical Center. It's been there since my father moved there back in the 80s, right? That's a really important place for us. I said that the churches had the food banks, they had the childcare services. Everyone goes there on Sundays. In addition to that, everyone uses MARTA, which is that transportation system. And I talked about how it was such a big issue that there's only the park and ride when you also need buses, because if you don't have a car to get to your job in the city, how are you supposed to get to the park and ride? I talked about the mall at Stonecrest where I grew up, how we would all go to the activities there. That's where I would go to shop. That's where we went, after school. That was the hangout spot. I talked about how it was pretty dangerous when I grew up. But in recent years, it's really turned around for several reasons that I didn't get into because we have a character limit. But the point is, I kind of told my life story of several parts, from the mall to the hospital, including the churches, the transportation problems, and I talked about the school district at the end, the school district I went to, that my brothers went to. I talked about the problems that it had, how the state tried to intervene, but it didn't work out. And as a result, we need to have a representative who we can go to and say, this didn't work out. I'm in college and they're having the same education problems that they were having when I was 5 and my older brother was in 12 in the middle school. That's a problem. So I gave my life story in those 5 boxes. So I would say that's the very opposite of tribal, because I hit everything from economic to religious to, the transportation issue to education to my social life, going to the mall, and I think that's what should be represented when we vote together as a community for one person.
I
So,
think
Maybe, can I say something here?
explanation.
Um,
I want to thank you for that.
okay.
And I just want to say that my family is from the Atlanta area, and they were a large family farming. Actually, they didn't own the land. My grandfather, so sharecropper.
mhm.
But my father was the only one to leave out of 8. And he left that state. He went around. My parents were divorced. I've worked all over the world. I don't bring to and now I live in Virginia, but I've lived in 8 states and 3 countries. So I don't bring a small view of community to where I live.
So could I step in here for a minute, Cheryl? I think one way the communities throughout Virginia might use this is there are some communities that may have been cracked, and that, in other words, they're separated into lots of different delegate districts or congressional districts. And so they don't have one representative who can address their needs. Like, for example, if there are fishing, a lot of fishing industry or whatever it might be. So it might be more, saying that my community is split. We don't have one representative to address our needs. We would like to be kept together. I think that's sort of the idea here. Okay, we're nearing the end. So let's see, does the league have guidelines for individuals to follow if you want to create maps as part of your organization? The answer is no. Kind of like what Michaela said, you draw the map the way you want to. And you don't have to use our collection tool on the website. So you can just draw it on your own if you wish. Okay, I think, let's see, there's one about Amherst County. We're Congressional District 6, the county is on the east side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Is there anyone on that is interested? Okay, so she's looking, this is Barbara.
Yes.
Looking for someone to work with her, I guess. We used to be in the same district as Nelson.
Yes.
So.
I'm in Lynchburg, so I'm close to you too, Barbara. Molly McLennan.
Oh, okay. Me?
So maybe you can chat each other directly here and then exchange a email, or we might be able to connect you. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and so if someone wants to create their own drive, outside of the league, you can certainly do that. Are there any questions we missed?
I have a question about the tool that we're using. When you, Michelle, when you put in the hospital, it automatically drew some geographical lines about where the hospital was, where the interest from the hospital was. Somebody had to create that.
Are you referring to when I zoomed in and you saw the like the DeKalb Medical like purple part? Yeah. So yeah, it's based on Google Maps actually. So for example, if you were to like Google Maps, oh, where is this hospital? That's what we have in the system.
And the same with, well, school districts have lines around them. Hospitals, you can choose to go to a different hospital than the one that's next to you.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, depending on the medical emergency.
But if you click on the hospital on the map, when you're drawing your map, basically it grabs the census block that it's located in, right, Michaela?
Yes. Sorry, I was not understanding.
That's why you talked about census blocks. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. If I clicked on my house, then my census block is grabbed automatically. I can't say, take these streets, don't take that street. It's a census block. So there is some limit to it.
Michaela, I'd like to strongly suggest that you reconsider being able to edit one of the maps that you're creating. Perhaps there's a way you could have like a version number on it, or have it include the initials of the person that has set it up. But to work on something like this and not to be able to go back in and edit it, to have to start all over again, I think is I can understand your concerns, but I think there should be a way to name these so that you know which version you're working on. Be sure you're starting with the most recent version, and as I said, a naming convention or something like that. I think it would be very, very helpful to be able to make changes on it as you talk to people. So
I think that's a great idea, because it said, I think in the discussion for the notes, that you couldn't change it once you created it. And so I think that's an excellent recommendation.
And once you create it, I think it's saved in your collection of maps, so you can always look at it again. Michaela, can you copy what you've written to start a new map?
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. What you do is you go to My Communities, which is underneath my account. You click on it and then you can see your testimony and just copy and paste. Yeah. And I'll
Okay.
definitely take those concerns and recommendations back to the team. So thank you for your feedback.
I think Nicole had a question.
Nicole, yeah.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to thank you. This is fantastic, and I can only imagine how much work your team took creating it over the years. So thank you for doing that. So my question is, and it kind of addresses, I think, Cheryl's concern. So my concern coming from Lynchburg, Virginia, is that Lynchburg was cracked. We have 2 House of Delegates and 2 state Senates districts. So there's 4 representatives in Lynchburg for one city. And so my question is can we define a city as a community of interest if we wanted to do that in order to sort of make the case that we deserve to have it be in 1 HOD and 1 Senate district?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then would it make sense then to create a committee to have one of these drives where we could kind of go out into the community and say, hey guys, this is a tool that we can use to get information to the redistricting commission. Everybody drop a map and make sure that you put in it that we want to be in 1 HOD and 1 state Senate district. And then whoever's in charge of that drive could then submit it to the redistricting commission.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Elizabeth? Let me see. Can you unmute Elizabeth, Chris, or just?
Well, I just had
Okay.
a reflection in terms of the usefulness of this in order to prepare for the redistricting. I actually just recently moved up to Winchester. For the past 30 years, I have lived in Prince William County, and I've been very involved in the various political campaigns that have been going on since the last 5 years. And I reflect on the win that we had in 2017 when the county sort of changed color. It was a very hard fought win. And part of the problem was it was almost impossible to win in some of these districts. For instance, my district, District 31, which is now at the moment represented by Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. She's of course an immigrant. She has immigration issues as the very core of her platform, but her district goes over 2 counties, all the way up to the western end of Fauquier County. Fauquier County is not Woodbridge, Virginia. And she ended up having to take enormous cultural leaps in order to get to know her constituents and campaign out there. She spent so much time working with small business owners, with working class people in Woodbridge area, Dale City, and so on. And then she was trekking out the same night to some event with a fox hunting party with a big landowner in Fauquier, and trying to win those votes. In fact, she spent the whole year trying to do that. And she was only partially successful in getting that vote.
We can't hear you.
I think your mic just went out, Elizabeth. I'm sorry. Okay, we're at 8 o'clock,
all-
so
all
I'm sorry.
over the place. So I think if we can,
Can't hear you.
Is Elizabeth, your mic is going in and out for some reason. So maybe if you want to send us something. We also have some emails that we put in here.
Pardon me?
So if you want to, you can get in touch with me, chris.lwv.222@gmail. Michaela put in her email account, which is msdaniel@princeton.edu. And you can reach her also through the team at representable.org. So if you have any further questions that we didn't answer or something pops in your mind, get in touch with anyone. We'd be happy to answer them. So we'll be having a same presentation, but it'll be the other Michaela tomorrow, I think. That's at 4 p.m. And we will post this recording on the website, etc. And on Thursday and Friday, we'll be introducing you or training you to use a different app. This one put out by Tufts University. Theirs is called District R or Districtor. I'm not sure what the proper pronunciation is. That will be Thursday night at 7 and Friday at 12 noon. And we'll record at least one of those as well. So we were really pleased that you joined us tonight. I hope you learned something new. And for the first time, we actually get to really participate. This is one way we can participate in the redistricting process going forward.
Thank you. Great job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela.